a signal now for when I'm needed. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning to them.
Yes, sir. Welcome to another episode of the Gotham Chronicles Beyond the Batsignal. I am your host, Domenic Iannicca. Join me as we dive into the depths of Batman's lore, dissecting the Rogues Gallery, and going deep into the Batcave and higher beyond the Batsignal, uncovering the stories and mysteries of our iconic vigilante known as the Dark Knight. Now, thank you very much for joining me as we talk about Detective Comics number 27. Batman, The Case of the Chemical Syndicate. Why did I want to choose The Case of the Chemical Syndicate? This is the first appearance of Batman, and I thought it was very fitting, given it is the 85th year since Batman's incarnation, and thought, well, what better way to follow up with who created Batman than with the very first comic ever released and the first appearance of Batman. Now, this comic was drawn by Bob Kane. However, on the comic, it will say Robert Kane, and written by Bill Finger. And this issue first was released in May 1939. However, there are some that argue, and I believe that this is a fact, and I will look it up, that it was actually first released March 30th of 1939. So this story, first incarnation of Batman, was also told many times after, with some retellings of this actual story. Actually, there was 5 retellings of this story. The first one that was retold was by Mike Friedrich and Bob Brown in an update to the 30th anniversary published on Detective Comics number 387. Following that was another one by Roy Thomas, and many of you might know this next name, Marshall Rogers, who retold the story in 1986 as part of the Secret Origins issue, number 6, focusing on the golden age of Batman. 1991, there was 2 stories that were released by Marv Wolfman, and who wrote the story, and illustrating was done by the legendary Jim Aparo. The other dynamic duo also consisted of Alan Grant as the writer and art done by another legend, Norm Breyfogle. Both stories were published in Detective Comics 627. How fitting. And the last retelling of the story was actually through the New 52 run and released in 2014. So this was written by Brad Meltzer and art by Brian Hitch. Published in Detective Comics Volume 2, issue number 27. Now, this story had a huge impact for years to come, as we can see now that Batman is not only just in a comic book, but many people might notice his first appearance being in a movie or a video game, or maybe it's a cartoon TV show. Batman is basically everywhere. Right beside Superman's logo, people most likely will recognize the bat symbol. I can immediately coin that as Batman. He's everywhere. Back in '89, even Batman Returns. I remember during while I was in school, kids were getting bat symbols as part of their haircut and would put it in the back of their head, which was like, talk about Batmania. I mean, I didn't get to really truly experience Batmania even though I was alive. I do not remember what it was like to live through Batman '89. However, there was even Batman Forever, where I do remember the bat symbol and the big question mark on people's heads. It was crazy. Even all those toys that were that for me, and I know that many others will also talk about the Batman Forever figurines. Anyway, I thought that it all starts from the beginning, May 1939. So, as I covered in the previous podcast, we had Bob Kane, who had this idea about Batman, and then brought it to his friend Bill Finger, where they kind of got together. Bill Finger had many ideas to how to change Batman from this individual with a domino mask, blonde hair, red tights, into a much more of a darker vigilante, to resemble more of a bat and not look so much like Superman. Speaking of Superman, I mean, we gotta kind of, it's almost like, pay homage to who Superman as an individual was and how he actually, to me, actually influenced Batman and the creation of Batman. And it's based on the success of Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel, who created this superhero, obviously very simple name, Superman. And I think it was National Allied Publications who were like, okay, we need to build on this success, right? In comes Bob Kane, and then the creation of Batman. So without Superman, I argue that there is no Batman. However, at this present day, I still believe that Batman would be, and this is to quote Bill Jetramy from Batman on Film, Batman is Teflon. I think a Batman film is almost guaranteed to do well in comparison to a Superman film. So we all know that James Gunn is focusing on what was called Superman Legacy is now just plain Superman. And the jury's out as to how this movie's going to be. There's a lot of characters in it, and it's not just simply a Superman film, as there's many other characters, like I think it's Hawkgirl, Green Lantern, and there's quite a few others. It's not just plain Superman with Superman characters in it. Now, with that said, I think we should get into the comic, give a brief description as to what it is, what it's about, and then I wanted to focus more on the influence that Batman had and why he is so different. Like, what makes him the most popular superhero? And I think, if you look at YouTube videos, a lot of people that I'll follow will always talk about their number one views is not about other superheroes like Thor. It's not about even a Superman video. The ones that draw the highest numbers is actually Batman, because Batman is such a draw. We even watched, there was one, it was Batman Arkham Asylum, but not the video game. However, that's incredible. But there was a movie based on the Suicide Squad, and I will look this up right now. Okay, I stand corrected. It was just called Suicide Squad, Hell to Pay. However, Batman did play a role in it, made an appearance, and obviously it's just to help sell. Now, the comic itself. So, obviously I do not have my hands on the very first issue that was ever released. I got this through digitally through an incredible app that is often recommended by a podcast that I highly recommend, the Batman Book Club. Ryan Lauer, who has pushed this app, and I honestly read so many comics through it, and it's called Hoopla. So I was able to get a digital copy. I think it was the Batman, the 80th anniversary, or the Golden Age. That was Batman, the Golden Age. And it's the first story that was in that book. And it starts off by describing Batman and who he is, a mysterious figure fighting for the righteousness and apprehending the wrongdoer. I immediately started hearing voices from the 1966 series. And I love how the art shows a sign of its times, but even the voices, it immediately just triggers something like, I immediately hear when Batman starts talking, I hear Adam West's voice. Jim Gordon. I hear the Jim Gordon from the 66 series, his voice in my ear. That's what I think of when I'm starting to read it. The story starts off with a murder, and, keep in mind, it's a 6-page comic, and it is full of dialogue, and there is a lot of story to actually cover within those 6 pages. Starts off with a murder with someone named Old Lambert. That's the name, just Lambert. There's no first name, last name. It's kind of like, okay, is this like Zendaya, where there's no first name, last name, Cher, Madonna, there's no name. Anyway, so Jim Gordon receives a call and then casually asks Bruce Wayne, who's just sitting in his office while smoking a pipe, want to come along? And then Bruce Wayne just sitting back and saying, sure. So they show up to the crime scene with young Lambert, who's denying the killing of his father, to Jim Gordon. Now, how do we describe Jim Gordon and what he looked like? In contrast to how you think of him now, where, he's got like a nice, thicker, more bushier mustache, this one was very prim and proper. And he had a nice little fedora on, looked classy. Even Bruce Wayne, who, he's not yet revealed as to who he is, as we all know who he is in his secret identity. But even him, both of them just smoking a pipe, friends, like they go way back. Anyway, they arrive at the scene with Jim Gordon kind of questioning young Lambert. Did you kill your father? And obviously young Lambert is absolutely denying, which is true. And describing that there was actually 3 business partners that Mr. Lambert had. Again, no first name. Paul Rogers, Alfred Stryker, and Stephen Crane. Now, Stephen Crane obviously calls. He's freaked out. Calls the house, and with the police answering, Crane speaks to Commissioner Gordon and is panicking because he just received an anonymous threat. So he's like, I'm next. Then we have Bruce Wayne, who just kind of steps in as Jim Gordon is getting off the phone and says, listen, you go do your job while I excuse myself. I'm just going to go home. Have a good night. Now, the following panel shows a robber breaking through a window again and is pointing a gun at Crane, shoots him. The murderer then goes to the safe, does the same thing they did to Lambert, opens up the safe, and is able to take this piece of paper, goes through the window, and then, as the murderer escapes, he hops onto the roof, where another crook is waiting for him, asking, did you get the paper? They turn their heads, and on the 3rd page of this comic, our very own Batman appears in a black cowl, gray suit, and very fashionable purple gloves that go as high as where the wrist is. Now, not a big fan of the purple gloves. I'm not sure how you feel about the purple gloves. I'm glad that they slowly transitioned to black gloves with a gauntlet. So I'm happy that they changed that. The other thing I noticed, the bat logo on the chest of Batman very much resembles, in my opinion, Robert Pattinson, who wore it in the Batman, right? The logo that you see doesn't necessarily have the ears, just like Pattinson's logo, his chest logo. So I am sure that Matt Reeves, who, as most of us are aware, drew a lot from the 66 series and older Batman comics. And as a director, this man loves Batman. And if there's anyone I would want to be filming and directing this type of film, it's Matt Reeves himself, who is drawing from years and years of history of Batman lore. Now, right here, this is a scene where immediately, and if you look at that 3rd page, Batman's on a rooftop fighting 2 criminals. The first thing I thought about was Batman 89, and that's the opening scene, the first time we see Michael Keaton's Batman taking on 2 criminals. Then we have Jim Gordon showing up saying, Batman, go get him. And immediately think of Batman Forever. Batman, Hope you remember that reference. If not, it's Batman Forever. Now, obviously, Batman gets away, and he's on. He looks at the paper and has a small little grin on his face, almost like he knows who it is. So Batman escapes, and he hops into this red car. Now, it's not named a Batmobile. He just kind of takes off, and they don't mention anything about a Batmobile. The Batmobile actually was first mentioned in Detective Comics number 48, which was released in 1941. That's where it's first mentioned. And then obviously that red vehicle, I think it was a Lincoln, I forget the car's name, but has like a nice old-fashioned hot rod. If you look it up, it's a thing of beauty, but very different from the modern day Batmobiles where, and even if in comics where you'll see like, the bat face at the front of the car. Now this is just a simple red vehicle that Batman takes off in. Now, to bring it back to where we have to bring it back to who the murderer is. This is the mystery, which Batman is trying to figure out. And at this point, he has that smirk, and it's kind of indicating he kind of knows who it is. So we have two criminals down, and now the panel now brings us to Paul Rogers, who shows up to the laboratory wearing a hat, nice little fedora, and what looks like a wig, right? Because he's trying to go undercover, be in disguise, so this murderer doesn't kill him. So he shows up to Alfred Stryker's front door, and the assistant, Jennings, answers it. And he's like, well, why don't you come in? And then immediately, just like, it looks like a club, like one of those like leather or it looks like a small little leather club. And just absolutely whacks Paul Rogers and knocks him right out. Rogers is then tied up. He has like this glass chamber that's hanging over his head, which this is where Jennings says, I use this to kill my guinea pigs. As the glass chamber is slowly coming down, we have our boy Batman, who's coming to the rescue, and he quickly grabs a wrench. No, he's not Dominic Toretto. And he goes right beside Rogers, gets this handkerchief, and plugs the gas where it's coming out of. And this glass chamber closes in on them. Now, Batman, clever guy he is, has this wrench and breaks through. Smashes the glass, and Jennings is beyond surprised that they escape. Batman then immediately takes out Jennings with a tackle and then some mean right and left hooks. Then we have Alfred Stryker, who shows up and is just like surprised. Well, how did you get out? And then we get the reveal where it was Alfred Stryker who was behind these killings. Stryker has a knife in his hand behind him. The knife that he has in his hand, he's about to go up and go try to kill Rogers. And from the shadows, Batman shows up, grabs his hand, and the knife immediately just drops to the ground. And this is where Batman takes him out. In the story at this point, this is where Batman explains to Rogers that the person behind these killings was Stryker, and that he wanted sole ownership of Apex Chemical Corporation. So what did he have to do? Well, he needed to kill Rogers, Lambert, and Crane because Stryker didn't have the money ready, and by killing these three owners and stealing the contracts, Stryker would not have to pay a single dime. Then there's the big confrontation. So the secret's out, and Stryker gets loose, points a gun to Batman, where Batman throws a punch so hard he crashes through the railing and into the acid tank, but thus killing Stryker, although it's not necessarily known that he is dead. Another first was, so just after the crime is solved, we have Batman quickly disappearing before Rogers could even finish his sentence. And then that's where we have the last couple of panels where it brings it back to Bruce Wayne and Jim Gordon. Now, I need to quote this here right from the comic. The next day, young Bruce Wayne is again a visitor at the commissioner's house. Wow, the best buds. Who has just finished telling Bruce the latest exploits of the Batman. This is where Jim Gordon steps in and says, and then Roger said the Batman went through a skylight. Bruce Wayne, just like the best buds they are, is like, very lovely fairy tale, Commissioner. The story continues where it says after Bruce Wayne has gone. And then you have Jim Gordon lighting up what looks like a nice big cigar. Bruce Wayne is a very nice young chap, but he certainly must lead a boring life. Seems disinterested in almost everything. And then we have the big reveal. Now, growing up, it's almost like, at least for me, I don't ever remember when Bruce Wayne was not Batman, or not knowing that Bruce Wayne and Batman were not one and the same. But in this story, the very first story, it's almost like, I'm sure it caught some readers off guard. I don't know. I liked how it ended, though. The story continues where Bruce Wayne returns to his home, to his room. A little later, his door slowly opens and reveals its occupant. If the commissioner could see his young friend now, he'd be amazed to learn that he is the Batman. Written by Robert Kane. Now, I actually love the finale of this book and how they kind of ended things off. I think it was very fitting to kind of, the way the writer kind of leads the reader to believing, who is Bruce Wayne? Who is it? It seems like he's just very laissez-faire, not a care in the world. And I love how this story shows a tale of two personalities, right? We have the one extreme where Bruce Wayne living a boring life and just doesn't care. He's just going to go home, relax. And then we have the creature of the night known as Batman, who is not only one in the shadows, much more of a darker character. And clearly Commissioner Gordon has no clue as to who his buddy that he's inviting over to his house is. So overall, what did I think about this book? I will be honest. I actually, for 50s comics, sometimes it's not my cup of tea. Sorry, not 50s. I'd say the golden age, not necessarily my cup of tea. However, I thought it was very entertaining. It was nice to kind of see the art, which isn't, standoutish like Norm Brayfogle or people like Jim Aparo or Lee Bermejo. The art was very standard, but that said, and then it's just little subtleties, which I like looking back at time. And then you can see that, Batman in 1939 was like a little time capsule. You notice the cars, the fashion, them smoking pipes, very different. That said, I want to talk about the impact that Detective Comics number 27 had on the industry as a whole. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was actually the introduction of a darker hero. So we have Superman, who is light, bright, and full of hope. And again, this comic was doing really well. And I thought, if you have this yang, why not this yang? Where you introduce someone like the Batman, who was a lot darker, and rather than being a superhero who had superhuman abilities and was this bright, optimistic persona, Batman stood out, and he stood out as a darker, more grounded character. And I think the one thing that many people, including myself, are drawn to in terms of characters is someone that you can relate to. And I think that's why, you see diversity in film. It's important because people want to relate to these characters. Batman is relatable in many ways, but in the most basic sense is he's a superhero that has no superpowers. He's intelligent. And, one thing that we get to learn more about Bruce Wayne is his upbringing and the loss that he's experienced and the trials and tribulations that he has to overcome. And then, as this character continues to build, we understand more and more about Bruce Wayne's psyche. Make no mistake that, the loss of his parents, where, at that, I think it was the age of 10, where he sees both of his parents shot, is going to have a traumatic experience on a young child, which added a lot more depth and emotional complexity to his character. The detective persona. Now, what was once National Publications is now DC Comics, Detective Comics, really played on the detective persona, where, unlike other superheroes, Batman was portrayed as a detective, and that's one of his biggest superpowers. And the other reason is because he's rich. I kind of find that line funny from Zack Snyder's Justice League. But going back to his detective persona, unlike other superheroes, he was a detective and took a lot of pride in it. And he was very intelligent, using his detective skills. And then he had his gadgets, which kind of set him apart from someone like Superman, who could just fly, throw punches. Batman had his utility belt. And that also set him apart. Right? He has the car, he has these gadgets, which is a big thing now in the movies. It's like, well, what is this gadget used for? What is this one used for? How is it practical? In the movie that came out in 2022, The Batman, by Matt Reeves, every gadget that Batman had was so useful, whether it was his grapple and how he used it. His bat symbol was almost like a larger batarang, but it was able to help cut the cable at the final scene. Spoiler alert. And then we have the Batmobile, which every person looks forward to the unveiling of a brand new Batmobile. Whether it is the old school 1966 Batmobile to Tim Burton's Batmobile, which, that's a great idea, is ranking the Batmobiles and talking about it. As to which ones are the favorites. But, there's so much to love about his detective persona. Now, another one on this list is his dual identity concept, where many of us, I think, have many different faces. Like, we are... the person that we are at work is the professional. The person that we are at home is the family person. It could be a mother, a father, a son, a cousin, a brother, a sister. It doesn't matter. But we all wear different hats. Now, for Bruce Wayne, very simple at this point, where he is billionaire playboy, which, wasn't established in Detective Comics 27. It was just more like, there's Bruce Wayne, who kind of is very laissez-faire, and then he has his other persona, Batman, who comes off as a much darker figure. But, when he's introduced, he has that dual identity. And I think that many of us, it's like, we have these faces that we show. And there's one line in The Dark Knight Rises where, Blake shows up to Bruce Wayne's house. And he was saying, like, I saw right through it. There was a cool guy with a cool car, and, shows up, and he's like, Bruce Wayne, billionaire orphan. And John Blake follows up by saying, when you smiled, he was like, we made stories about you. Like, they were all legendary. But when you smiled, I saw right past that, because it was the same smile I tried practicing in the mirror. And that's when I knew who you were, meaning Batman. And I think that many of us that are going through certain experiences, we try to show the best part of ourselves, even though we might not be feeling 100%. And, there might be good days and darker days for each of us. And I think the one thing that we can relate to is that Bruce Wayne experiences some depression. I look at how the real face is actually, or his real personality is actually Batman, and his secret identity is the one we call Bruce Wayne, where, he shows up to these parties, lives a lavish lifestyle, But as I think many incarnations of Batman, Batman 89, even Batman Begins, Bruce Wayne reiterates that this isn't me. I remember one with Rachel Dawes just saying, there is more to me. And then obviously then there's that famous line, it's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you. But I think where we can relate is a lot of us will show that happy face and try to think positive, but deep down there's something bothering us. And many of us also wear a mask at times because, mental health is a real thing. And I think now more than ever, because it's a lot easier to talk about, Batman is someone, now I don't want to just diagnose him, but he is going through something. He is feeling something. And, in order to come up with this concept of Batman, he had to avenge his parents. And obviously that's where he came up with Batman and who he could be and how he could make an impact in the world. And I do feel like he is very relatable to all types of humans, like, both male and female. Now, the last one I wanted to touch upon is Batman's iconic design. The Bat logo has evolved over the years. I'm sure you can look it up and look at many different Batman logos from 1939 to present day. But it pretty much stays the same with the two bat wings, bat ears, and a point that's right at the bottom in the middle. And it's iconic, right? It's so recognizable. People love it. And it's like, what's your favorite Batman crest? Right on his chest. Which one's your favorite? Arguably, there's probably a couple. Yellow oval, no yellow oval. Like, there's an argument to be said there. Different comic book artists have different iterations of how the bat suit looks, right? Some people love the Dark Knight suit. Others don't. Some people love the Arkham Asylum. Others don't. Where I lean towards, I do like, I'd say hands down, probably my favorite is Batman 89. Even the Pattinson suit because of how practical it is. But that said, it's how he's designed with, obviously he's got the cape and cowl, his dark design, and how it's just a visual impact for all of us on screen. We all await to see what Batman looks like in his new upcoming movie, right? Like, what's his suit gonna look like, right? A lot of us comic book nerds just look forward to stuff like this. I remember when it was Robert Pattinson's his suit was released and it broke the internet, right? And all it was a simple Batman theme in the background by Michael Giacchino and just dark images of Robert Pattinson doing a screen test in the suit. And that was diagnosed and analyzed like crazy. I mean, every YouTube video, YouTuber, didn't matter. We're analyzing what it is, right? And people look forward to it, but it's iconic, right? And people love it. And I think it's not just the whole design, again, revisiting as to like, he's got his gadgets, he's got his suit, he's got his car. And even like the little touch that Pattinson added with the raccoon face where he's just kind of painting his eyes. And when he takes off the mask, we see that as the viewer. I think it really touches audiences in many ways that we love and adore. Now, lastly, I thought that the influence of Batman on the superhero genre. So this comic itself was introduced in Detective Comics 27, and it was a noir style type of character. So you have Superman, who is light, bright, hopeful, and then you bring in this noir style character who is dark, gritty. There's a detective and psychological depth to this character that people love to analyze, and obviously has evolved over time and has become a lot deeper for many of us to look into, many writers to delve into and write about, which gives this character so much personality, and it gives the testament of time and historic importance over time that many of us love. And I think going back to Detective Comics 27 is the start of something different, something that was so impactful that many people did not see, right? Now, with that being said, that is the end of this episode. If you would like to follow me on X or Twitter, I am at beyondthebatsignal. Or if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, it's Beyond the Bat Signal. And finally, if you'd like to rate and review this show, by all means, I encourage you to do so on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Until then, thank you for listening. Join us as next time we continue our exploration into the world of Batman. Remember, the adventure doesn't end here. Stay vigilant. And until next time, this is Beyond the Bat Signal, signing off.